Hi, everyone. Just to make sure that the podcast remains a safe space for everyone, I wanted to jump in and let you know that there is talk of suicide in this episode. Hello, I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to, well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Being a teenager in today's world comes with its own unique set of challenges, making it increasingly difficult to navigate adolescence. The constant pressure of social media, pressures and expectations from friends, from peers, from parents, and those that they put on themselves can really weigh heavily on our young people. Academic pressures, bullying, body image issues, changing bodies, romantic relationships, and the always on nature of the digital age, isn't it just relentless for them? Honestly, I could go on, but I won't. All of this at one time or another is going to have an impact on our kids in the way they feel. Emotional ups and downs, we know, are par for the course. Stress, anxiety, and at times distress that feels really hard to come back from are all part of the landscape that our adolescents, our teens are navigating. And as I record this episode with my wonderful guest here in the wings, I am the parent of a 13 and 15-year-old. And so I have invited today's guest, Dr. Jim Mazza, to join us today because he is passionate and committed to making a difference in the lives of our adolescents when it comes to how they learn to regulate their emotions, understand and manage distress. He brings with him his insights as a professor of educational psychology. He also co-developed a powerful resource for schools called the DBT STEPS-A program, DBT Skills in Schools, skills training for emotional problem solving for adolescents. And he's coming us from the west coast of the USA in Seattle. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Jim Mazza. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to you for sharing your time with us. I know that there's so much that we can talk about that can help our listeners, whether they're teachers or parents or caregivers, really support the young people in their lives. And so I really wanted to start, I guess, by finding out a bit more about what's led you to this work, because this landscape our teenagers are navigating, it's tough. It's not easy work. And yeah, I'd really love to know a little bit more about what led to your interest in this area.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me. It is a passion of mine. And, when I was going through high school myself, back before social media ever existed, I struggled with my own emotions and I had some really good friends. I even wrote about one who actually died from suicide in the book, that I knew that this person was suicidal. He also happened to be the valedictorian of his class and he was a state champion in cross country as well. And so this was a kid that looked on the outside to be really, really good and perfect in so many ways. And on the inside, I knew he was just experiencing just high anxiety, a lot of obsessive compulsive difficulties. And I kept saying to people, hey, this kid needs help. This kid needs help. And they're like, nope, he's great. He's got all these scholarships. He's got the world by the tail. I'm like, you're missing the boat. And hard for them to listen, right? And so after a long battle, he did die by suicide. My lifetime partner, Liz Dexter Mazza, also had a brother that died from suicide. Again, a lot of those anxiety issues. And so, our heart was really trying to give back to the community about what can we do to catch these people earlier. And so for me, I kept thinking about high school where you talked about in your introduction, all the body changes, all the beginning of those intimate relationships where they're so difficult and so awkward, trying to navigate yourself while navigating a relationship, while navigating your independence from your parents. Boy, you just kind of navigate yourself into circles and you just don't know where to go. You're spinning. And so, the idea here was to say, why can't we help our students, help these young high school students, even middle school students, ages 12 through 19. We know that things are going to happen because that's what the stage of adolescence does. I mean, it's trying to figure things out. So why not give them tools while they're trying to figure things out rather than giving them tools after everything has already gone downhill and they've fallen off the waterfall. And so that was kind of the precipice of what we were trying to do.
Jim, thank you very much for sharing with us your experiences growing up and what you've and your partner Liz have lived through in losing two very special people to suicide. It's one thing, isn't it, to talk about it on a podcast, but the experience of going through that and seeing that unfolding and seeing the distress and seeing the need for help and that help not coming soon enough, it makes sense that you've professionally moved in this direction to step in early. And this is the thing that as a kid these days, it's, I work a lot in schools and I have teenagers myself, and it feels like it's such a jungle out there. And I remember my daughter saying to my brother when he was visiting here from the UK, she said, "It's so hard being a kid these days." He said, "Look, it was hard being a kid when we were growing up too, but we could leave it all behind at the end of the day." And so with social media, you can be at home in a safe home for most kids, hopefully in a safe home and feeling like you've got what you need around you. But you open your phone, somebody posts something, and all of a sudden everything can unravel. And it can happen in an instant and in an environment where you otherwise would have been protected from that, at least until you went to school the next day. Can you tell us about dialectical behavior therapy? Because this is really what the lesson plans and the interventions are based on.
Right. And so this is an evidence-based therapy that has been designed for highly complex, pervasive issues of emotion dysregulation. Marshall Linehan developed this at the University of Washington, where I'm currently located, to help with people who really struggled with having, consistent emotional difficulties that were harming relationships, job opportunities, difficulty in established relationships as well. And so they were really interfering with their lives, and to the point where a lot of these people then began to start to self-doubt themselves, began to feel like that the only place that they should be is like 6 feet under. So the suicide rate among those that have borderline personality disorder pretty high. Since she developed this back in 1993, it's broadened to all sorts of things: substance abuse, cognitive disorder, other types of psychological difficulties, depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and so forth. And so what we did is say, look, let's not wait for kids to get worse and worse and worse so they have to get one of these diagnoses. Let's help them, because we know that emotions are hard to manage when we were kids and social media wasn't even around. And like you said, you had to get through the day or the next day from some of the embarrassment, but usually a week after, somebody else had already done something that made it more embarrassing than what you did. Everybody forgot what you did and moved on. The internet doesn't allow you to move on. It's there forever now. And that's really highly problematic in that regard for people who are trying to move forward, right? And so not being able to move forward makes it really frustrating, sometimes embarrassing, and then shameful to people. Those emotions get really strong and take over sometimes our decision-making ability. So one of the things about dialectical behavior therapy, it's under the umbrella of cognitive behavior therapy. So it's a specific type of cognitive behavior therapy where it accepts what your emotions are at this moment in time, whereas cognitive therapy might say, geez, you're having an irrational thought. A lot of our students already know they're having an irrational thought. They're just going to say, no kidding. And then all of a sudden you go like, okay, now what do I do? Versus DBT says, I can see that you're really mad. And they're like, yeah. And they said, so let's do a distract skill. Let's do something that's kind to yourself. So there's strategies when the person is really at a high emotional pain level to use, rather than just saying you have an irrational thought. They already know that. And then once some of that intensity of the emotion comes down, or the shame, guilt, sadness, anger, it comes down, then we can use some of the cognitive strategies in place. And so DBT has two areas, and it's like a teeter-totter. So there's an acceptance and validation part where you're really struggling. You have to accept that's where you are. In this moment, that's where you are, and let's do something to not make it worse. And once you come down from that intensity, then over here is the change side. Now I'd like to change my anger, change me getting angry so quickly or shameful or whatever else. And so there's strategies to go back and forth. The idea behind DBT is which strategy, which side of the teeter-totter are you on? And really important to know that, right? And so, because there's a set of strategies over here that won't work over here, and vice versa.
Yes. And one of the things that you touched on was this idea that when we do get, and our young people do get really distressed, really angry, anxious, highly emotional, it's it's hard in those moments to think about what to do, isn't it? To put
Oh
something into
yeah.
practice. So do these strategies rely on having someone else who's around, a teacher, a parent, a caregiver, who can help a young person who's distressed to draw on the skill that would be helpful at that time?
Yeah, I don't think that you have to rely on them. So I think have to have someone else that helps you coach to learn them, right? And then you practice them, kind of almost like you do with a therapist, right? Except these are at school. So we design the curriculum that actually to be to school teachers who have no training in mental health at all. They just need to be coaches and guides for the student to say, I'm here. I get it. You're struggling. What does it look like? Can you show me what skill you're using? And maybe I can help give you some, coaching, some support in that way. Once that emotional intensity comes down, their prefrontal cortex kicks back in. They're able to make pretty rational decisions. When it's high emotions, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. You don't make very good decisions. And that goes for adults too. It goes for you and I, right? When we're tired, feeling sick, or at high emotion, high stress, right? That we tend not to make very productive, very effective decisions because our amygdala has all the energy. And so we need to kind of shut that down and say, forget it, get out of there and get back into my prefrontal cortex.
Yes, yes. Now, the skills, I really want to talk about the skills, and we can touch on them obviously and introduce some of them to our listeners today because and I know already of a person in my life who has learned some DBT skills that have been profound in their life,
Yep.
profound. And so I'm really excited to start talking about some of the skills. So, where do you start? Where do you start?
So we start with mindfulness that you have to be aware of what your body's telling you, what your brain's telling you, right? And so if I'm aware of my anger, if I'm aware of my shame, then I can say, okay, my gosh, you're not in a good spot. You're feeling a lot of shame. Just being aware of that will help you say, okay, what do I need to either say, I don't want that shame to get worse, or I want my shame to go down. So one is to not make it worse skills, right? Those are distress tolerance skills. And one's to kind of change the amount of shame I'm feeling because maybe I'm not processing right. Maybe everybody didn't see me do that situation, or it wasn't nearly as bad as I think it was, and that type of thing. And so being aware is the first thing. And we talk about that the mindfulness skills of being aware of what your body's saying, what your brain's telling you are the core skills. And without those skills, without being aware, none of the other skills are going to work.
I get that. And it just takes time, doesn't it? And a willingness to notice and accept sometimes how our body feels and what we're thinking is uncomfortable. It's painful.
Totally, right? And just, it happens to me because I've got kids too. I've got 11, 15, and 16-year-old, right? And there
Yes.
are times when my 15-year-old is really good about pushing my buttons. And I can feel my frustration go up so fast. I'm like, ooh, I got to walk away from this because whatever I say is not going to come out right.
Oh
Right.
my,
Or I've got to say, okay, he meant something different. I'm going to still try to be the cool dad or the effective dad at this point and be the parent and not get into a screaming match with my 15 or 16 because it's not going to help. It'll only make us both feel bad.
that's exactly right. So, when you talk about mindfulness, because mindfulness is something that all of our listeners today will have heard before and will perhaps have practiced themselves, or some will have taught mindfulness. How do you start by teaching some mindfulness skills through the DBT resource that you've developed?
Yeah. So the first skill that we teach in mindfulness is that we have three states of mind. And so one's our emotion mind, which often, if we make decisions when we're in emotion mind, we often make things a lot worse, right? Where our emotions are driving the bus, they're making the decisions, and that's part of the amygdala. You're taking over all the energy. The other side of emotion mind is reasonable mind, where you lack emotion. It's very cool, calculated, analytical. Emotion mind is very hot, fiery, spontaneous. When you combine those and you overlap some of the circles, there becomes a middle circle, and that's called wise mind. And it's the wise mind that has a little bit of the emotion, a little bit of the reasonableness, and it tends to make decisions that align with your long-term values. And so that's what we teach first, that you tend to make the most effective decisions, the ones that represent who you are as a person to your core in wise mind rather than in the other two.
What you've just reminded me of is this idea of spontaneous decisions. And
Mhm.
you've already spoken about having lost a friend to suicide, and Elizabeth also. And I wonder if, as hard as it is to talk about, I think it's really important for us to touch on this idea that sometimes teenagers will make rash decisions when they are highly emotional, and sometimes those decisions can be catastrophic.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah. So, my friend who was actually a teammate of mine in high school, he had been suicidal for, oh boy, close to 30 years. And so a long time, multiple suicide attempts. I was there several times when he was thinking about suicide. He would often drink quite a bit, substance use, right? So he can actually put away the natural body tendencies to want to stay alive. He wants to get rid of those inhibitions, right? And so he becomes inhibited to just go ahead and do some of the things that normally you wouldn't do. So he is making those impulsive, irrational decisions because he's taken something, he's on something, where his normal mindset wouldn't allow him to do that at all because he's lost all reasonable mind, right? So he went from wise mind all into emotion mind about how things are so painful and awful, and couldn't get track, couldn't seek some of that reasonable mind, even 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And so those are really hard times. And so long phone calls, discussions with significant others, and so forth. And so, yeah, so he had a long fought battle.
Mm. Yes, he did. And what a lucky fellow he was to have you in his life and somebody to support him the way that you did. It's frightening, isn't it, as a parent of a
Hmm.
teen? And we can look all around us at all of the different things and the different decisions that teens around us are making. And some of them we can look at and just question and be baffled by. And and so a lot of teens are coming to different decisions about their actions, their behaviors, their choices based on their home environments, their upbringing, their experiences. And so it's really powerful, I think, for us to move on to talking about some of these distress tolerance skills so that our young people, that us as the carers and the adults in our young people's lives, can start to share these with them. And also, obviously highly recommend the resource. And I'll point our listeners in the direction of you as a resource also in any of your publications and the work that you will continue to do in this area. So distress tolerance skills. Can you talk to us about those, please?
Sure. The distress tolerance skills are over on this side of that teeter totter where you're doing acceptance and validation. Your emotions are really, really high. So your prefrontal cortex, your decision making part of your brain that you usually use is basically offline, and things are being driven by all the voices that you hear inside your head that are telling you how you're not very good, you're never going to love somebody again, you're nothing. Those types of voices, those doubtful voices. And so what the distress tolerance skills do is to say, look, you're under a lot of distress. First, the mindfulness says, are my emotions above my internal thermometer of from 0 to 100? Are they above 65? So we teach that as the first distress tolerance skill, your emotion thermometer. If it's above 65, you're likely to be in emotion mind. This is a time not to make any decisions about relationships, financial, and so forth. It's a time to distract yourself from your emotions. Do something different to help buy time to allow that emotional intensity to come down, which gives it time for your prefrontal cortex, your reasonable mind to kick back in, right? And so one of those things is one of the skills is the accept skills with, we're trying to do the distraction. A second set of skills is improve, where we're telling you to be kind to yourself. Yes, you messed up. Yes, it hurts to have a broken relationship, and be kind. Life's hard. It's difficult at times, all right? And so be kind to yourself for in this moment today. So do something good for yourself, have some ice cream, go for a walk, take a bath, whatever that is that helps you just kind of feel better about who you are. Another skill is to use your own body's chemistry to help reduce the emotional intensity. So we call that our tip skill, right? Where the T is temperature, the I is intense exercise, and the P is paced breathing. And so your body's got some unique features to where if it's in crisis, and it feels like it's in danger of collapsing or dying at that point, it'll shut everything down, right? And so our tip skills to use really cold water on the face, especially high on the cheekbones. Our intense exercises, go do something really intense for 20 minutes and then stop. And our own body's endorphins kick in, and it actually shuts down everything else, which is good because the emotions come down with it. And then the paced breathing is actually exhaling longer than you inhale. There's no set strategy. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 6, inhale for 4, exhale for 5, whatever it is. Your body soon goes into oxygen debt, and your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and starts shutting things down and say, no, you can't be doing that. And so, again, that'll help bring the emotions down to where there's a point where it's below 65 on your emotion thermometer. You can now start using some of the change skills, which is 2 other sets of skills that we have.
Yes. The tip skills are the ones that the person in my life spoke to me about regularly. And the cold water, because that's initiating the mammalian dive reflex. Am I correct in?
That's exactly right. The
Yes.
dive reflex.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that. And also, is there a caveat around the use of cold water? Because what I have seen others do is submerge their face in like a bowl of icy cold water. And are there any kind of warnings, I suppose, that we could share with our listeners today around the use of cold water at that extreme?
Right. Yes. So the tip skill is really valuable because that dive reflex that you talked about is in all human bodies, right? So everyone has it. And so the idea is to have really cold water. We don't think 35 degrees, 36 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius there, right? Depending on where you're from. Right? We're looking at roughly 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So something that's above freezing by, certainly 5 or 6 degrees, right? And so the idea is that the body feels like once it gets cold and you're holding your breath bent down, your body starts to believe it's underwater, and it starts to shut all your bodily functions down so that you can survive being underwater for minutes. And so we had this happen in the United States. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin, which is a north state in the middle of the United States, where it often gets below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So in Celsius terms, it'd be really cold, right? And so, yeah, it'd be really freezing, right? And so you're talking probably 15, 20 degrees, sometimes below in Celsius. Kids have fallen through the ice because the lakes get ice on them, sometimes a foot deep. And they have fallen through the ice because there's warm spots, and they have been under the water for, 45, 50 minutes. And you're like, they can't possibly breathe that long. They must be dead. And they'll get divers to go in and get the child over to the emergency room, and that child's back in school within 2 days, sometimes the next day. And you're like, how does that work? Dive reflex shuts everything down. And so the idea is to tweak the dive reflex, invoke it a little bit, right? Let's see a little bit of it. We don't want the whole thing. We just need a little bit of it. Now, your caveat is a great issue to talk about. If you have heart difficulties, then we don't want you using the temperature one at all. Do intense exercise or do paced breathing, because we don't want to artificially start to shut down the heart using the temperature exercise when you have a hard time starting it. That's off the table then. So if you have any type of heart condition that way, we don't want you to use the temperature one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the school environment, for example, would it be about splashing water on your face? Is it about a cold compress, putting a handful of ice cubes in a face washer or in a tea towel or something like that? Are they the different ways that you could apply
all
that?
of them can work, right?
Yes.
So we recommend even getting some paper towels. If you're a teacher, getting some paper towels. And if you have a refrigerator, like freezer in your classroom, just keep some frozen paper towels, right? And then put them right here, right? Because some of our kids, especially if they have makeup on, they're not going to want to put their face in a bowl of cold water, right?
Yes.
And so what we're trying to do is just get that dive reflex to kick in. Maybe it's frozen oranges or frozen peas, whatever else it is, right here high on that cheekbone.
High on the cheekbone.
And that'll help. If cold water is going to work, it's just you're not holding your breath as long with cold water.
Yes.
So you want that to stay constant on there for a little bit more effective.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I love these practical ideas for the classroom, and at home we've got access to all of those things. So there's always frozen peas in my freezer, that's for sure.
Right. And then I think a lot of the first aid kits that people have, there's usually ice cold packs where you smash them and that chemical, those work just as well. Just wrap them in paper towels so you don't burn them. I mean, they often have chemicals. And so I don't know what that would be on the sensitive parts of the face. And so I would just wrap it in a paper towel, but that coldness will certainly get through and start to kick in that dive reflex.
Yes. And these are things that young people who learn this skill can then do for themselves. They can do it for themselves. And sometimes they might need an adult to say, why
That's
don't you
right.
do this? Other times they'll be able to, and it's with repetition, isn't it? The more you do it, the more you realize that this is actually really effective. This is going to make a difference for me over time. Then they're more likely to be able to think of these things themselves, even as their distress is rising.
That's exactly right. So back to your original question, they might need some help in the initial stages for guidance. And the more they do it, the better they're going to get at it. And the better they get at it, the more they're going to be able to do it themselves. And that's the ideal goal, is giving them a toolbox of tools that represent them, that are effective for their own situations, and they can take it to school with them, to college, to wherever else.
That's it. And that's the beauty of it. These are life skills. They're life skills. Every child should be learning these. And
I,
yes. So
I agree with you.
you agree. Yes. Well, goodness me, the size and the time and effort that and the evidence and the planning that's gone into this incredible resource is evident of just how strongly you feel about that too, of course. So yeah, it's absolutely exceptional. So what about the change skills? We've talked about the distress tolerance, reducing that thermometer, reducing that emotional temperature down. And I love that. I love that because that's really relatable for everyone in this idea of just put a number on it. Put a number on it out of 100. If you're above 65, then these distress tolerance skills can be really powerful. They can be powerful at any stage because it's just subjective, isn't it? It's just, do I need it or don't I?
The emotion regulation skills. So that's the set of skills when you're below 65 on your own internal emotion thermometer, that you say, okay, I don't want to feel sad, or I don't want to feel guilty, or I don't want to feel embarrassed. How do I change some of that? And so one way that we talk about that is what we call checking the facts and opposite action. So we got to check the facts. Was I really that awful as a partner? Have I really been that bad as a son or daughter or non-binary person in my family, right? So we check the facts, because often our interpretations of how awful we are as a person or partner or a sibling are based on our interpretations. And sometimes our interpretations aren't accurate. I'd say a lot of times, sometimes they're not, right? And so what happens is that fuels our emotions, and that gets us going up higher and higher. And we don't want that, right? And so we're trying to change the emotion. So if we check the facts and can find in an alternative explanation that equally fits the situation, then you have to do is what we call is opposite action. So let me give you an example. If you're walking down the hallway in a school and somebody trips you and your books go flying, you're upset. Your books are all over the place, and you turn around and you're almost certain that person did it on purpose. And you turn around and sure enough, it's a person that you don't like. And now you're like, you want to punch them, you want to just curse at them, you want to do all sorts of things, right? So you're angry, right? Based on your interpretation real quickly. So there's anger. Now let's say same thing happens, your books go flying, you trip, and you turn around and that person is also on the ground because they tripped, because somebody pushed them. You're not so angry anymore. You're actually like, oh, are you okay? Right? Didn't realize that you had fallen too. So your interpretation is, oh, they must have fallen too. I wonder if they're okay. And I'll give you the third one. So your books go flying because you got tripped, and you turn around and you see the person standing there, and the person's blind. They didn't know that you were there, right? And all of a sudden, are you going to be angry at them for tripping you? Absolutely not. They're blind. They literally didn't see you there, right? They didn't know that you were there, and you're going to make sure that they're okay. And so the same incident happens. You get tripped, your books go flying. So it's not the event of tripping, your books go flying. It's actually your interpretation of the event and why it happened that actually is driving your emotions. So if I can say to myself, I'm an impatient driver. I don't know how you are, Jody, in driving. I like to get places. And so when someone's not driving very fast, or they're driving erratic, let's say they're driving really fast, I'm like, what are you doing? I get angry. Like, oh my gosh, you're endangering my life. And Liz, my partner in life, who's a DBT therapist, says, they're rushing to the emergency room because they're having a baby. I'm like, oh, yeah, you go ahead and go. Yeah. So my anger was way down. Like, yeah, you're right. Same event, but because the interpretation is different. So that's a good example of checking the facts, alternative explanation. Maybe they're driving erratically because they're on their way to the emergency room for a broken leg or delivering a baby, I have to do the opposite of what my initial anger was wanting me to do, which was confront. I back off. I'm gentle. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and go.
Yes.
Same thing with the books.
It's reminding me of the living with anxiety. Sometimes if I was dropping the kids off at school at kinder or at the primary school, I would always be around in the car park, and sometimes I would wave at someone and not get anything back. That happens occasionally, happens to all of us. And in my mind, my anxious mind would jump to the conclusion, I've done something. I'd immediately start thinking,
Right.
what have I done or what haven't I done that has caused this person to be upset with me? And I think that's really common with anxiety, isn't it? That we fear that for some reason people are unhappy with us. And what I learned to do over time was to use that idea that there could be a different scenario, and that
Right.
the high likelihood is that that person just didn't see me. And it completely changes the way you feel about it. It's the story that we tell ourselves about the situation, isn't it?
Correct. And so if there's an alternate explanation that equally fits the facts, you have to do the opposite of what your behavior urges to do, because every emotion has an action behavior associated with it. So when you can label your emotions accurately, worry, fear, shame, then you know what the action behavior is. You do the opposite of it if the facts don't fit the situation. If the facts do fit the situation, then we have what's called the wave skill, and you sit with it. As a matter of fact, you put everything else away and you just sit with that emotion and give it a lot of your time. So for example, when my friend died from suicide, it's a sad situation. And I knew that friend for 30 years, right? Really close. So crying fits the situation. It fits the facts. So I'm gonna ignore everything else. I'm gonna cry, and other people will cry with me. And just, yeah, this emotion now fits. And we've gotten into the spot where we often are trying to teach our young kids how to experience a different emotion, and we shouldn't be doing that. Sometimes the emotion does fit the facts, and so if it fits the facts, sit with it. You're right. Go ahead and experience the emotion.
Experience it.
Give it your attention.
That is not an easy thing to do.
Oh, no.
And especially when there are devices, I have one here somewhere, that we can just pick up our teenagers, if they've got phones or iPads or they're gaming or it's very easy to distract yourself from how you feel. How do you help adolescents, teenagers to develop that willingness to sit with their feelings and experience them?
Oh, boy, that is a great question. I think probably just through practice, right? How do we do it as adults? You know, it's probably trial and error too. I don't think I was a very good adolescent sitting with it. I would always distract myself, and in my alone time, especially at night, it would all come back, you know, and hit me all at once, right? And so I think learning to, if we know as parents our kids are going through a difficult situation, is to say, yes, this is really hard. I get it. Math is really hard. You're getting a C and you're working your butt off though. And you studied hard for that test. I'm sad for you too that you didn't do well on that test. And I got to tell you, I'm really proud of you the way that you studied. Right? And to say, okay, yeah. And so I'll cry with my kids. Didn't happen to me. And, you know, when I see them and they're hurting, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I can validate that emotion a lot. That's hard.
Yes. Yes. And that's very powerful as a parent, because our hearts do break when their
Oh, yeah.
hearts are breaking. And for them to see that from the point of view that, yes, we get it, we feel it. I mean, we're wired to feel it, aren't we? But also for them to know that we've got them, we've got their back, we're there with them.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Right. I think one of the things that we have found, especially in our own kids, right, is that I think a lot of our adolescents, probably even younger than that, are tweens, you know, our 11 and 12-year-olds, they don't want to experience fear, shame, guilt, because they think it's not going to go away, because they keep telling themselves how awful they are, or someone keeps making fun of them and so forth. And it feels like that emotion is going to last for a long time. And it gives you this physiological sensations in the body that you don't like. So if we can explain to kids, our adolescents, that emotions are like waves. They come in and can be powerful, and then they go back out though. And they come in and can go back out. So they don't experience sometimes the go back out part. They don't experience the wave piece, because they're constantly telling themselves how they don't measure up, or they feel that their parents are always mad at them, or the teacher doesn't like them, right? And so if we can get them to just experience the sadness of something, even though they tried, even though they're a good partner, or like their first breakups, right? Whoever gives you the book about how to be a good first boyfriend, girlfriend? Nobody. So you have no idea. So you break up with your first one, you're like, I must have been terrible at this. That's your first thought. And so let's talk about that. What does that look like, right? And so I think helping them experience that the waves come in, sit with them with that, and then the waves go back out.
Yes.
And they're going to come in again. And life is going to be like that. Life's going to be in waves at times.
That's right. I remember when my anxiety was undiagnosed for around 20 years, and I ended up suffering with major depressive disorder, which was horrendous, really, really tough. And I remember my psychologist saying to me on one occasion when we were meeting, I'll never forget, obviously, really was really impactful. He said, "You have experienced the worst sadness a person can feel. You've moved through it and you've moved on from it." And I was healing at the time. And it was just so empowering to realize that I have actually felt as sad as you can feel. And I've moved on from that. That is no longer how I
Right?
feel. And I didn't feel like that the whole time. It came and it went and it came and it went. And it was so empowering to know I've survived that and I can do it again. But when you're in the thick of it, it feels like it's
Right.
never going to end.
That's right. You can't see your way out of it.
Yeah.
Correct.
So for our children to just have these conversations, and I think for parents listening and for carers listening and for teachers who will have students in their classes, and also obviously some children at home for some teachers as well, that we can just start even having conversations about these ideas, can't we, outside of high emotion?
Absolutely. The time to have the conversations is before the high emotions impact them, right? And so there'll be times when they have the high emotions. We want to learn the skills though during regular calmer times when they're in wise mind. And so that's the idea behind the curriculum is we teach it like science, language arts, or any other history class. And so learn the skills and then practice them at home and practice them outside of school with your friends. Because there'll be times when the emotions get high and then you can just you grab it from your toolbox and like, oh, I already know how to do this, and go ahead and do it.
Yes. And that leads me to a final question that I'd like to ask before we thank you for your time and part ways is for young people supporting their friends, often they feel helpless. Their friend is very distressed. They're going through a really difficult time. It can be hard for kids to know what to say and what to do. So, have you got a parting piece of advice that we as adults can share with young people as to how they can be a good friend and support a friend that's having a difficult time and so they feel more empowered and equipped?
Yep, sure. And this also goes for parents, right? Because we don't get a. I didn't take any courses on parenting 101 or 102 anywhere, right? And so it's hard. If you're have a good friend who's struggling, first and foremost, just listening is very helpful. Let that person know that you're a caring friend and that you're a sounding board. Just let them vent to you. Really important. And then I would simply say, I don't have the answers. And so what I do know is that you and I, now that I know you and I are in this together, and we are gonna get through this together, right? So the we piece becomes important so they don't feel so isolated. And I'd say the same thing as a parent. Boy, this is outside of my skill set. I don't know how we're gonna do this, child, and we'll do it together, right? And so let's find out how to do that, right? And so as if it's a peer, let's go talk to teacher Jody, who's just wonderful. She's really brilliant and knows all these different things. Let's talk to her about that first. Or let's go see Dr. Jim, and he's a psychologist. We'll go together. So parent brings a child, both come in together, right? So that there's some ownership of this is challenging and we'll get through this together. I think that becomes really important. And the final piece is not to be judgmental. The one place where parents sometimes fall down that our kids don't is that if kids are talking to other kids, they tend not to judge them for their behaviors. Us as parents kind of say, oh, I told you so. I told you not to do this, right? And so my own kids are like, I can't tell dad because he's going to be mad at me because he told me not to do this. And there's some truth to that at that point, right? And you're like, and my first gut reaction, my urge behavior is like, I told you so, right? And don't say that. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to help. Sorry that happened. Where are we right now? And how can I help? Those are the words I want to say. It takes time. You have to be mindful of what's going on again.
That's right. And we're not always going to get it right. Sometimes we will.
Oh, we're not.
No, I mean,
I don't.
No.
And I know the skills.
Exactly. Especially when we get emotional. We can't always think exactly how to respond. But a beautiful thing that we can do is we can come back and say, you know what? Before, when I said this, if I had my time again, I'd say this. Let's start again, or let's revisit it, or let's come back to it. And
Right.
and that's a really powerful thing for our kids to see us do as well. So
Totally.
yeah.
Right. And so, and I tell my kids, because I have lost my temper at times, right? I've gotten angry, and I'm like, and as soon as it happens, I know that's not what I wanted to do. Right. So my kid starts maybe crying or whatever else. I'm like, okay, that's a lose-lose. And afterwards I say, I'm sorry. Look, I am not a perfect parent. I'm not expecting you to be a perfect child. So if you're imperfect and I'm imperfect, maybe we can work together.
Oh.
All right. And so I might need some help in how to say things, or just not judging right away. You could maybe use some help in trying to do X or Y. If you try over here, I don't care what the result is, try. I'll try over here. That's a win-win. I can live with the results.
Oh, love it. Absolutely love it. We are always learning and growing, aren't we? As our kids are. Yes. Honestly, I'm incredibly grateful to you. What you've shared with us today are so many practical ways that we as adults can support the adolescents, the teens, the kids in our lives of any age. You can transfer some of these to very young children in the way that we respond and what we're starting to teach them about the way their brains and their bodies operate and about feelings and emotions. So I'm very, very grateful for your time. So tell us a bit more about the book and how people can connect with you.
Yeah, so the book's available at Guilford Press. So, and I think it's guilfordpress.org or guilford.org. And then Amazon also carries the book, and so you can have it delivered that way. We tried to make sure that the book was not too expensive. We want people to have it. It is not required for the students to have it all. So there's handouts and activities for the kids to do that are all on a PDF. Once you buy the book, you get access to that PDF file. And so we want to make sure that teachers weren't having to have a lot of expenses to be able to implement this curriculum there. And if you feel like you'd like to chat with me at all, send me an email. I'm Mazza, Mazza, at uw.edu. And if you're interested in any of the trainings that we do, dbtinschools.com is our website.
Thank you. I'll link all of those in the show notes. And it's very generous of you to be available to have a conversation with people who want to learn more about how they can implement these incredibly powerful skills in their schools and in their well. So thank you again. Thank you for joining me. It's morning here, it's afternoon there. I hope you have a lovely, lovely evening. And thank you again. And time for me to go and whip my kids into shape to get them ready for school.
Yeah, just because you've got breakfast to get and kids to get to school. All right, take care. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, Jim.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jody Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodyricardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.